it's Sandra here again. And now, in this lesson, we're going to start looking at something which is one of the most important skills in English. And it goes across all the parts of our course. But particularly when you're studying poetry. We're looking at analysing imagery. So, first of all, what are we talking about when we talk about imagery? Actually, that's probably the easiest thing to get your head around. Metaphor, simile and personification all create an idea or an image in your imagination. So it's something that you can see in your mind's eye. It helps you to visualise what the poet is talking about, and that's why it's so important to poems. Because poems want to create this rich visual picture where you're really having your imagination kicked off into this different place entirely. And a poem is a great way to do that. Imagery compares something the writer is exploring to something you can visualise. In the poem Hotel Room 12th Floor, the poet compares the Empire State Building to a jumbo-sized dentist drill. Now, you might not think it looks much like a dentist drill, but it does in a way, because even though it's a giant building, it's got that wee sort of sticky up bit at the top. And if you could imagine that being turned upside down and then being used as a drill, that's a pretty painful image. So that's a really creative thing for the poet to do. I always teach my pupils that if you want to test whether something's an image or not, you say to yourself, could it really be that thing? Could the Empire State Building really be a dentist drill? Of course not. So of course you know that that's an image. Consider the main themes of the poem. The poem deals with the damaging nature of technology and also the violence in human nature. The building was a technological wonder in its time. And even though it had been around for a long time, even when Norman McCaig went to New York, it still at that point was the tallest building in the world. McCaig's looking at this building thinking, really? Is that all this technology really helping us? Is this ability to build these huge buildings really doing anything to help the human race? Or is it just about somebody's ego to try and build this huge building? It's being compared to something that causes us pain because the poet wants you to visualise that painful image. When we're thinking about imagery, we have to explore the emotional impact it has on us. Reflect on the feelings engendered by the figurative language. Figurative is a big word, just to say imaginative. If language is figurative, it's not literal. It's not explaining something directly or just describing something. It's being imaginative in the way that it describes or shows something to you. So metaphors, simile and personification are often used to evoke specific emotional responses in readers. Consider how they contribute to the poem's overall mood and emotional landscape. Here in this poem, we have a lot of images that are really quite dark and grim. There's the blood glazed on the sidewalk. Now, glaze is like a paint that you put on to make something permanent. A glaze goes on top of a pot before you fire it so that the pot will have this permanent shine and won't chip. If you think about that idea of blood being glazed on a sidewalk, it means that there's so much blood on there that it's stuck on there forever. We've got this idea of the dentist drill, but we've also got these wild war whoops, and that's the noise of people outside. He's taking that as a really hostile noise. And then we've got the screaming and the broken bones. Well, the broken bones isn't an image because he probably is talking about real broken bones and real police cars and ambulances. But the whole thing gives us this idea that this is a really violent place. What he's trying to say is that even though there's been years of development and years of technology, America is not actually that different from the Wild West. The image we have of these people going about with guns and just dealing with everything in this really aggressive angry, violent manner. Whether you agree with McCaig or not, you can sort of see that that's what he's trying to say, and that's his view that he's trying to get across to you. And here's some examples. So here we've got this helicopter skirting like a damaged insect. And I've showed you how to analyse here in the just as, so to format that some of you may have been taught. Listen, you can do it this way or you can do it another way. It really doesn't matter. I just like this way of doing it because it breaks it down nicely when I teach it, and it sort of allows pupils to get it really. We're saying that just like an insect that's hurt can't fly easily, so too does the helicopter look awkward, and it looks like it's kind of twitching and jumping about. Now, if we said that literally, it would be quite boring. He could see a helicopter twitching and jumping about around the building. But actually, if we say it in an image, just think how effective then and how easily he did that image. A helicopter skirting like a damaged insect. Here's another example. Midnight has come in from foreign places. This is a personification. And the time of midnight, the actual time of night, is personified as though it's a person that comes kind of creeping in and brings darkness with him or her. Midnight as a person is shown to be dangerous and unfamiliar, like an invading force. McCaig's trying to capture that fear that people have of going out at night in strange places. You'll hear all sorts of things said about New York, and it's actually a pretty safe destination for tourists these days. I think it's probably one of the safer places to go. Although you will hear people talk about the subways and the streets at night, and sometimes people would probably choose to stay in their hotel rather than go wandering about at night time. But McCaig is definitely saying that nighttime is a more dangerous time. Here's what the exam question looks like, and we're a long way from there at the moment. This is just giving you a wee sneak peek at what an exam question would look like. So, by referring to two examples of language, explain how the poet creates a clear impression of the city. So that's pretty straightforward. It's lines 1 to 5, so we can't use our midnight quote because that quote came from further down in the first stanza. So we need to use anything that we can see from the first two lines. And I've done an example answer, but before we come to that, I'm just going to show you first. The question number will always be either 45, 46, 47, and that's because the texts are always in the same order. Sometimes there's slight differences between the number of questions for each text. So just beware that Norman McCaig will always start with question 45, 46. Maybe not exactly that, but around that area. Now, most of the questions in this are going to be worth 4 marks, but you get 2 marks just for quoting from the poem that's right in front of you. You'd be awful silly to leave those marks behind by not doing a quote. Sometimes people leave these questions blank, and I just want you to start thinking about how to do exams effectively, because when you get in there, if you're not putting a quote down, you're really missing out on the easy marks. Now, here's how I phrase my answer. Do you remember the examples from before? Well, we've been able to use one of them. So here's a good point. If you memorise some of these quotations and memorise some of the analysis, you might not be able to use it. Just like this, we couldn't use the midnight quote because it was from a different part of the poem, and it wasn't appropriate to use it. But here's the one that we could use, was the skirting like a damaged insect. And so I've chosen 2 of the most famous ones here. And if you had memorised these quotes before you went in and maybe got your head around some of the analysis, you would be delighted to see this question come up first, because you'd be like, oh, I know what I'm doing. And here we've said 1 mark for the quote, a helicopter skirting the hotel. And then what you can see is that I've adapted my answer so that it answers the question. I haven't just put the analysis down and stopped short. I've added a little bit more. So here you can see that I've said, just as an insect that is hurt can't fly easily, so too does the helicopter look awkward. Now that's all good and well, but the question was about McCaig's view of the city. So I've said it shows technology in the city could be dangerous or feels a little bit dangerous. Because I've went on and mentioned the city, I'm making certain that you're going to get that quote there. That's how you would be absolutely sure of getting the quote, because I've related it to the city. The jumbo-sized dentist drill, just as a dentist drill causes pain, so does the Empire State Building. The city's so advanced it can cause danger. And again, I haven't just stopped short at the quotation and the direct analysis. I've sort of added a little bit to show how that answers the question. So that's a perfect answer for 4 marks. We're going to keep using this as a model as you go through, because as we go through lesson after lesson, we're going to do more and more practice ones that will hopefully build you up to where it'll be really easy for you to answer this question and these questions. So that's all for this one. And we'll see you all in the next video.